I love walking around my local countryside, and it's absolutely riddled with public footpaths. And these public footpaths, they're generally pretty well signposted and maintained. But even so, it's always useful to have a map, for moments of uncertainty. So I want to take this video to talk about some awesome maps that I highly recommend. First, before I talk about the maps that I take out with me on my walk, I want to talk about the map that I use to plan my walk.
I use a website called Plotaroot.com to figure out my intended walks before I set out. So Plotaroot.com is based on OpenStreetMap's mapping data, which is great. Is great mapping data for public footpaths and walking routes, as opposed to Google Maps, which is rubbish if you're not a car.
So first, a quick digression. OpenStreetMaps are crowdsourced, so which means that folks walk around with GPS, capture data of where they are, put information on it, and use it to keep the maps updated and correct. And when I first met my husband back in the dim and distant past, when phones didn't have GPS and you had to actually buy a separate GPS unit which tethered to your phone, which I believe had a keyboard at that time. Not a number pad, but a keyboard, so we'll talk about that era of phones. So when I first met my husband, he was busy doing the very first mapping of the town we both lived in for OpenStreetMap. So, he was walking around any sunny day along all the roads in town, and quite mysteriously, all of these walks seemed to end up at a particular pub at blues o'clock. Eventually, through this rigorous process, he got the whole town mapped. Or so he thought. So shortly after he and I got together, we were driving past that particular pub to the Asda, and we noticed just further down the road from the pub was a cul-de-sac that was completely missing from any maps he'd created. And every single time he had been distracted by the pub before he made it to that cul-de-sac. As it was, as it still is, the lure of a cold cider. But I think in the end that cul-de-sac did get mapped and make it onto the OpenStreetMap, or maybe not. Maybe it is forever missing as subsequent generations of mapping enthusiasts have continued to get distracted by the pub. We shall never know. Anyway, end of digression.
So back to Pottery.com. And while the mobile version of the site is pretty good, it's much better on desktop where there's room to see the whole map. And I can't recommend this site too much. I can't recommend it enough. There is no end to the amount of recommendation I would love to give this site. It's great. And there's a free version and a premium version, and I always tend to use the free version, but I'm sure the premium features are pretty good. I'm just not sure what they are. I mostly use it to create my own routes on the map. You can also browse for routes people have already thought up, so you can already find some great walks around your local area that someone else has gone to the trouble of scouting out. Right, so let me just show you how I plot my walks. This is just bringing me in on my hometown of Royston here. And pretty much what you do is you select auto plot and choose that you are a pedestrian, not a car or a bicycle. And then just start dropping waypoints on the map. So let's start from the park and then head up Newmarket Road and onto the public footpath. So this is the walk I went on a little while ago. And carry on along this path on the Hertfordshire-Cambridgeshire border, then down to Barley, So yeah, it's I don't even have to be particularly accurate with where I'm clicking. It just sort of like guesses where I mean. Look, I want to walk to this field. It's like, no, you want to be on that footpath. Yeah, so it's pretty good to just have a quick click around and roughly plot out the route you want to go on. And there's, yeah, as I say, an awful lot of public footpaths are listed on this. And then once you've done that, you can have a look and it'll tell you how many miles that planned walk is going to be. Let's just zoom out and drag it around. Right, so there's a bit here where it will calculate how long it thinks it'll take you to do the walk, and you can sort of say how long you think, what you think your pace is. I'm not exactly sure what my walking pace is. My problem is that I do tend to stop and take pictures and dally around and draw pictures and stuff. So it reckons that it's about an hour and 3/4 of actual walking, but I think when I did this the other day I was out for maybe 4 hours. Oof, yeah, maybe closer to 5, because it's not currently adjusting for hills. So let's change that. Oh yep, added another 10 minutes, because a lot of this is all uphill right here. So that was fun and slow. Anyway, yeah, so sometimes I plan on my paper maps, but most often I plan on this site.
So having planned my walk, I don't tend to sort of make notes or print anything out. I mostly just keep it in my head and trust that when I'm out in the countryside, I'll be able to pick it up from the terrain and signposting, or check out my paper map and figure out where I am from that. So paper map, I hear you say, is it 1922 or 22 or 2022? Why not use mobile? For me, a couple of reasons. So reason one is sometimes I'm out in the countryside, I've got no signal. I've got GPS, so I guess I could download some maps to check with, but I guess figuring out which mapping squares I'm going to be in and remembering to download that's perhaps an extra step that's a little harder than just grabbing a map and throwing it in my bag. But I think the main reason is that the world is massive. It's enormous. It's huge. Yeah. How could one really experience something so wonderful on 3 inches by 6 inches, whatever? Nah. Yeah. To get both the big picture of where you are and also the detail of the terrain all in one, you really need a paper map. And the most awesome maps, in my opinion, in the UK at least, are Ordnance Survey maps, and specifically Ordnance Survey custom maps. And the custom part comes from the fact that you can buy a map from these guys that is centered on literally anywhere in the country. So I first discovered these when I was given one as a housewarming gift for my new house. I was given one that centered on the town I lived in, with a picture of a cat on the front. You can pick a custom photo for the front as well, and we had a cat, so we got a custom one with a cat on. So this one, the one which I've had the longest, is an explorer map, and that means that the scale is about 4 centimeters to 1 kilometer, which I actually really like. I think that it's just about perfect, and pretty much any loop that I can do in a day, starting and finishing in my hometown of Royston, can be encompassed on this map. And there's still so much to explore on this map that I haven't even looked at yet. So I did get myself some other maps, but I haven't touched these yet. But I thought that for the coming summer, it would be great to have some maps that are centered around the 2 towns that are most closely accessible to me by train. So Cambridge and Letchworth Garden City. And these are the Land Rangers, not the Explorers, which I picked just so I'd have a little bit extra for my money's worth, bang for my buck, really. Like, I just wanted it to give me more places and options to look at. And I haven't been out yet on a walk with any of these, but I'm quite interested, especially as I've trained my mind to the scale of the Explorer map. So it's going to be a bit interesting getting on these maps and looking at a walk and being like, oh, yeah, it's an hour between this village and that village, and it actually turning out to be twice as long because it's twice as far. But I'm sure I'll adapt. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to giving these maps a crack this summer when I've run out of local villages to explore. I think I'm probably about 10% of the way through this map if we're talking from a completer finisher point of view. I do love living in the UK where we have all of these public, well, in England we have all of these public footpaths. If we were to go up to Scotland, I could literally walk anywhere, which would be great. It's all public footpath, as I understand it. Scottish person, somebody tell me if I'm right or wrong on that. Have I misunderstood? But yeah, I think in Scotland there's like full on right to roam, just like there are in a bunch of Scandi countries. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, so I cannot recommend more highly the Ordnance Survey custom maps. Yeah, it's maybe about somewhere south of 20 quid. But yeah, just get yourself a map of your local area, and you'll actually probably be quite surprised by just how many public footpaths crisscross the land, even in a a town area or suburban area. Just little ginnels and cuts and back paths around houses and stuff. It's really quite interesting and definitely a different way of looking at the world compared to the car driver's perspective, for sure. I guess one more thing is that if you are going out and about with your paper map, that it's always good to make sure that you have a compass with you, in case you get turned around. So I do have a compass that I keep in my art bag, and touch wood, I've never actually had to use it, and I think that's just a factor of the fact that I always go walking during the daytime on sunny days. So I pretty much always know where the sun is. I have a wristwatch. It's fairly easy to sort of get a rule of thumb idea of which direction's which in that regard. Yeah, and so yeah, I wish you all the joy of walks this coming summer, and I hope you have a smashing day.